Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into a special edition of the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills guys, presented by the Buffalo Fanatics, and this is the Air Raid Hour. Different time, a little unusual, a little we had to give Steve Tasker and Chris Brown a little competition on One Bills Live, I guess, right?
We did, and it feels kind of like that holiday show we did with the timing, and
Yes.
it's funny because like today's a holiday though, right? Like as far as like it's a federal holiday, so I hope some people that are normally working, hopefully they're off of work and they're able to kind of tune in at this time. And obviously, for those that usually can watch us at night, then they'll be able to just catch the replay at the normal time. So should be good for a lot of people, I hope.
Yeah, we have big aspirations here at the Air Raid Hour. On Christmas Eve, we took on Good Morning Football, and today we're taking on One Bills Live. So the entire premise of today's show is this: like, we've been going back and forth, draft, free agency, draft, free agency. I always think it's best to focus on just one, and I think eventually, as we get closer, we'll start tying them in together. But I mean, to me, at this point in the off season, I feel like mixing draft talk and free agency talk is kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to say pointless, but like sort of like a waste of time, because once free agency happens, that's really what's going to, make your draft. And we can really start to hone in on the draft once we've gotten through free agency. So I wanted to talk a little bit about free agency today, because I feel like we've been maybe focusing a little bit on the draft the last few shows.
Well, that's true, and I mean, like, let's be honest here. If my guy Wyatt Davis sitting there, the guy I like in the draft, did the Bills go out and sign for whatever reason? Let's say they go out and sign starting money to a guard, then that's probably not going to matter so much in the draft. I want to change my focus. So
Yeah, if they
you're
re-sign
right.
Mongo,
Once free agency kind of comes and goes, and the thing is, we know the Bills are like they're going to be limited in what they can do in free agency. So I think that's why a lot of people have been so focused on the draft, because they just assume like, look, either we're going to re-sign a couple of the same guys we have already, or we're really not going to do much in free agency. But that's why today we're going to kind of go through the different tiers and things that we think could play out, which things we like, which things we don't like. And that will really set us up once free agency comes and goes to really focus on what positions the Bills really need to address. Like mentioned Wyatt Davis, but if the Bills go out, and we'll mention this guy today again, if the Bills go out and sign a JJ Watt, they're probably not going early for edge in the draft, right? We can kind of assume that. So we'll see. And today's all about free agency. And I'm ready to go with this.
And what we got to do is we got to walk into this with the preface of, right now the Bills have what, $1.3 million in cap space. It's not looking too great, but through, guys here at BF like Michael Lefebvre, and through other guys like Greg Tomstead at Cover One, Joe Marino at Locked On, they've been having a lot of conversations about the salary cap lately. And, I'm fully expecting by the time free agency rolls around, the Bills to have somewhere between restructuring and releasing some guys between $35-45 million to play with. And then you obviously have to subtract about 8 to 10 for the NFL draft. So they have somewhere around $30-35 million, I think, to play with in the free agent market. And obviously we're going to have some holes to fill, and more so than ever. And we're going to probably have to have this conversation on another show. I think some of the development of our bottom half of the roster players is going to be crucial to our some of our to being able to sustain success next year.
I agree. I mean, guys like Tyrell Dotson could end up being more important to this team than maybe we're realizing. Guys like Jaquan Johnson maybe at some point becomes important to this team. Dean Marlowe becomes important to this team. We'll see what happens with him if they re-sign him. But like, there are guys on the bottom half of this roster that can end up being important to this team, and guys that are bottom half of their respective depth charts now that the Bills have high hopes for, like an AJ Epinesa type who kind of came on at the end of the year, who they may be expecting bigger things from in the year to come. So yeah, I'm with you on that. That bottom half has definitely got to be developed.
Let's start off with the W's coming here, and let's jump around. So essentially what we're going to do today is we're going to go position of need by position of need, and we're going to talk about some of the free agents that we like that are available, and we're going to categorize them in 3 categories. Players that are like the superstars, the guys you're going to have to pay big money to. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the mid-tier guys at each position, and then sort of maybe the bargain bin guys at each position, and who we'd like to see the Bills sign and why we'd like to see them maybe splurge a little or go for a middle tier option or try to bargain bin a player. And let's jump around a little bit. And let's start with defensive end. We usually go in chronological order here. So I'm throwing things off. I'm throwing things for a loop a little bit today, but the W says it's time to release Jerry Hughes and bring in JJ Watt. Let me know if you agree or disagree with this statement, Dave, because I have a little bit of a take here. As much as it's nice to save $7 million releasing Jerry Hughes, I still think Jerry Hughes is a very effective pass rusher in the National Football League. I think him and Ed Oliver, their box score statistics could seriously improve by adding some power players to the defensive line, some more guys to fill the gaps, some more guys to give them a little bit more free release. So do you agree with the W here? It's time to release Hughes and bring in a new right end, or do we look for someone to complement Jerry Hughes?
I don't think it's time to release Hughes because if you release Hughes, you're just creating another hole at a position where we need help, right? I mean, say what you want about Hughes and the sack numbers, but pressures and all that, like, yes, I get it. We need to get home more. And that's the point of us having this conversation about bringing in guys like JJ Watt or other guys that we're about to talk about. But I don't like to create holes just because we feel like a guy maybe isn't a superstar. Like, just because Jerry Hughes might not be a superstar doesn't mean he's still not effective and allow us to address that position in a way that's like more quantitative in the sense of we're stacking guys than we are of just kind of like getting rid of one guy and replacing him with another for incremental improvement. So I'd rather actually take the route of keeping Jerry Hughes and bringing in a guy like JJ Watt on top of that. Maybe restructuring or possibly cutting a guy like Mario Addison instead. I'd rather keep Jerry Hughes than Mario Addison if it comes down to it.
Yeah, and we got a comment here from Andrew Miller, and we're going to stick to the defensive line. So Andrew, we're going to get to defensive tackles right after edge rusher, but Andrew Miller says thoughts on Sheldon Rankins because he's on my list of defensive tackles, and we'll stick on the defensive line here. Don't see him staying in New Orleans. Think he'll cost too much. Phil's big need with the big guy. I think with Sheldon Rankins, in terms of his career, where his career is at right now, he hasn't flashed too much as a pass rusher. He's been a pretty solid run defender, and he's still relatively young, which means you could still see potential for an uptick in pass rush because you've seen that from Sheldon Rankins sort of on his college tape. So to me, Sheldon Rankins is a guy who is probably going to cost you somewhere in the $6 to $8 million range, but despite the fact that he's younger, I don't see a team giving him a long-term deal, and I don't see Sheldon Rankins wanting a long-term deal. I see him probably wanting to sign a shorter-term deal and still getting to free agency again in like 2 years and being able to bank cash out again, when there's more money in the market. So I think Sheldon Rankins is a huge possibility. I don't know how much we want to go the defensive tackle route, but he's a guy who's sort of like a mid-tier free agent because you can get him on that short-term deal.
Yeah, I mean, Sheldon Rankins is a guy that was on my list. I kind of figured that he would be on a lot of lists, so I went. I've listed a few guys out that were a little bit different on mine. So do we want to dive into defensive tackle right now and continue with that, or
let's
we
dive
want
into
to
defensive
go
tackle
back
and
to
then
edge here?
we'll get back to edge. So for defensive tackle, I didn't really consider this guy a big money guy, but according to PFF, they expect this player to reach double digits in the free agent market, and that is Shelby Harris, the Denver Broncos, who I think is the kind of defensive tackle that I would like to see the Buffalo Bills pursue. I don't actually think he's going to get $10 million, but that's what Pro Football Focus projected for his contract. What I'm looking for in defensive tackles this year is I'm looking for a guy who will platoon with Star Lotulelei at the one technique. another bigger-ish guy that will sort of rotate with Star and then eventually replace Star. Someone to free up Ed Oliver to be the freak that he is. I'm not really interested at this moment in adding another 3 technique. Like, it's just not something that I'm looking forward to. So, I had Shelby Harris on my list. I had Lawrence Guy on my list. And then I had about 20 names that you can get off the bargain bin of just big fat guys like Damata Pecco, Snacks Harrison, Steve McClendon, Corey Peters, Mike Pennell. There's a ton of guys in that range that you can get to just stuff up space. What were your guys that you had on your defensive tackle list?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think I'd rather have a couple fatties, but I mean, you got an older guy like Snacks Harrison, who's 33, who's probably a bargain. You got Mike Pennell, who's played in a couple different systems. He's 30. He's a big boy. He played nose tackle for the Chiefs in their 3-4, but could be a 1 technique, I think, in a 4-3 if need be. Those are more of like mid-tier or bargain bin guys for me. But for me, like the big guy that's out there is Dalvin Tomlinson, right? I mean, he would be like the prized tier 1 type guy. He's probably going to command $10+ million a year. Are you going to be willing to, in 2021, pay both Star and Dalvin Tomlinson as 1 techniques in the neighborhood of $10 million a year? Probably not. I know Bills fans have been eyeing him since the trade deadline, would obviously upgrade us there for the longer term. He's only 27, 15 tackles for loss across 2019 and 2020 combined. But the question for you, Steve, is he fat enough for you?
He's fat enough. He's fat enough.
Okay. Top 25 in PFF rankings for interior defensive line in 2020. So he's kind of like the prized guy. But if you're looking for like bargain bin guys and mid-tier guys, I like Snacks Harrison. I like Pennell. I like T.Y. McGill, but he's more of a 3 tech, so I'm not so sure there. And Vincent Taylor as a guy who's also a free agent, who's familiar with the system. He might actually have played himself into more of a mid-tier contract given his age. He's only 27 and played okay for the Browns, 200+ snaps for them this year, and a guy that's familiar with the Bills. So, but if I'm the Bills and we decide that we're going ham on a 1 technique, then it's got to be Tomlinson's got to be the guy you go after if you really want to sink the money there. So.
And that's where you kind of do bring the draft into it a little bit, because I mean, we obviously have limited resources. You could trade back in the first round. It's not a guarantee, but you could trade back in the first round, pick up 2 second-round picks and a third-round pick and get 3 guys in that really sweet spot of the draft in the second and third round to come fill some gaps. And say you have, with one of those 3 picks, you can easily go out and you can get a Tyler Selvin. You can get a Marvin Wilson. There are defensive tackles out there in the draft. It's way more cost effective and you can spend your money elsewhere. That's why, whereas much as I like the idea of going after a Dalvin Tomlinson, we're stuck with Star Lotulelei. Like someone said in the comment section, cut Star. You can't do it. This would have been the year to cut
more
Star.
To cut him than keep him.
Yeah. But he opted out, so his contract rolls over. So it's kind of like his 2020 contract where it's going to cost more to cut him, than to keep him. So they could look to restructure Star, but it's still going to be a significant chunk of change in the middle of your defensive line. I think they might go the more cost-effective route, but that's where I want to start using the term mercenary, because I think the Buffalo Bills are a good enough team where we can start to go out and hire these sort of mercenary type of players. Ndamukong Suh, Tyson Alualu, Lawrence Guy, Derek Wolfe, guys towards the back half of their career who might just be looking for 1-year contracts in the $4 to $6 million range, probably more towards the higher end than the lower end, but who knows, depending on how talented they think the Buffalo Bills are. Players that are towards the tail end of their career, they're just going to sign a 1-year deal, so there's really no long-term investment, no long-term risk, and you're bringing in a highly productive player just at an older age as sort of a stopgap who can still be a very competitive stopgap player. So to me, all my interest flows into like those guys if we do decide to pursue defensive tackle in free agency. Ndamukong Suh, Tyson Alualu, Lawrence Guy, and Derek Wolfe. Those are 4 guys that I would love to put in the middle of this defense, and I think those are 4 guys who could take pressure off of Ed Oliver.
Yep, and I'm with you as far as where to put the resources. Like, it probably doesn't make a ton of sense to put high dollars there, although we'd love to get Tomlinson. I'm with you there. Scott coming in with the super chat. Thank you, Scott, as always, a big super chatter on our show. in your opinion, now we don't have a lot of cap space. We got to sign our own players. But in your opinion, how do you think the top 3 guys that we should go out and sign? Who do you think the top 3 guys that we should go out and sign? I think what we'll do probably is at the end of this, when we go through all of our free agents, we'll probably come up with like our top 3 list based on maybe like a combination of pricing here.
If we're talking about
if you're gonna,
who are the top 3 players that you want? Not. I'm not saying we're going to sign them all together, but like, who are the top 3 players that you want?
Top 3 players I want. Number 1, I want Curtis Samuel.
Yep,
I would love to have Curtis Samuel on this team. Number 2, I mean, honestly, this is like going to be an under the radar kind of guy, but I want Roderick Johnson. I want the tackle from Houston, who is their basically backup tackle behind Tunsil and Howard. He's a free agent. He's 26. He graded out pretty well, can play the right side. I think he's kind of an under the radar guy that could be a good right tackle for years to come. So for me, it's Curtis Samuel, Roderick Johnson. And then honestly, as far as like a third kind of wild card guy, let me look at my list because I got a lot of guys on this list. You know what? I'll tell you who I would want as a third wild card guy. Give me some Gerald Everett on the Bills. I think he's going to be he'll be a little cheaper than Jonu Smith. Should be about $1 million or $2 million a year cheaper than Jonu Smith. He's got receiving chops. I mean, he's shown it in flashes with the Rams. I mean, the Rams obviously moved more towards Higbee this past year, but I think Gerald Everett could be a nice. He's going to come up in my sort of mid to higher tier tight end list as we get to the tight ends. But give me those 3 guys: Curtis Samuel, Gerald Everett, and Roderick Johnson.
You took 2 of mine in Curtis Samuel and Gerald Everett. So first of all, Curtis Samuel, if you could get him in the $8 to $10 million range, first of all, this is a guy who comes in and can replace John Brown. So take the $8 million you save from John Brown and invest it in Curtis Samuel. He can replace John Brown and sort of platoon with Gabriel Davis. He can give you Isaiah McKenzie's jet sweep ability. He can give you what John Brown gave you down the field. And honestly, going back and watching some of his film, like I have been the last couple of days, just the snippets they have on YouTube, he does a lot of the mid-range stuff that John Brown does as well. He adds the jet sweep ability, the kick return ability, and he can play running back. He can be the speed back who comes in on shotgun and sort of, motions into the running back role and carry the ball and be our speed back to complement Devin Singletary and Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. So like the dude can literally do everything for your offense. Like he is just the Swiss Army knife that you can, and he's not like a Swiss Army knife who's like good at things but not great at things. Like he's legitimately
and he can punt return
at a lot of the things that he does. And he's a Brandon Beane draft pick. Brandon Beane took him in the 2nd round of his last draft after he took Christian McCaffrey because he was looking to sort of instill some playmaking ability into that Carolina Panthers offense, breathe some life into that offense. Now this offense has plenty of life this year, but Brandon Beane could look at Curtis Samuel and say, this is the guy who can put us over the top. This is the X factor player who you put him on the field with Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley and Gabe Davis and Dawson Knox and Josh Allen. Like this is a guy who just gives teams so many fits that they just can't defend all of our weapons. And he can do so many things. So Curtis Samuel is number 1 on my list, I think, with a bullet. And that's shocking to me because I went into this offseason thinking I just wanted a big fatty. Like, just give me all the fat guys. That was my philosophy going into the offseason. And then I started looking at Curtis Samuel and just absolutely fell head over heels in love.
I'm with you. I think my overall philosophy, knowing that free agency hasn't started yet, was go after like skill position and known commodities in like the skill position market in the free agency and go after the trenches in the draft. That's kind of been my philosophy this offseason, but we'll see how it goes. And I stole Gerald Everett. So who's a third one for you? Because we're going to get through all these guys anyway.
I'll give you 2 more. Number 1, I think number 1 with a bullet after Curtis Samuel is Trey Hendrickson from New Orleans, who I think has shown that he has really developed because he came from a smaller school in Florida Atlantic. He was a middle round draft pick. He's always been a solid rotational defensive end, really came onto the scene this year with 10.5 sacks. This is a guy who I think sacked Patrick Mahomes a ton in the game that they played him, made Patrick Mahomes' life a living hell going one-on-one versus Eric Fisher. This is a power player at defensive end. And what I like about Trey Hendrickson is you can put him on that defensive line and he's not that sort of like swim move type of get around you type of guy like a Jerry Hughes is. He's sort of a bowl you over type of dude. And I think we need to add some more of that to the defensive line. So Trey Hendrickson. And if I'm going to add one more, it's going to be Xavier Rhodes, the corner. A guy who could play a little bit of zone, a little bit of man. He's a veteran. You could probably get him on one of those mercenary type deals, like 2 years, 12 million, 2 years, 14 million. And he'll finally, at least for 2 years, sure up what you have across from Trey White. Like, you don't have to worry about our secondary until next offseason when Micah Hyde becomes a free agent, because they're set. Like, and Teron Johnson becomes a free agent too. But like, literally, you're not sweating anything. Like, you signed Xavier Rhodes, and you're not sweating anything in the back half of your defense heading into 2021. Like, it's set. It's set in stone, and you're ready to go. And you can be a little bit more versatile on that defense and mix in a little bit more man, which is what Buffalo really needed to do a little bit more of in 2020. We got something from Josh here.
Yeah, Josh says, because we're still talking about that D line, cut everyone except for Starr and Hughes. Addison gone, Butler gone. I think that's a lot of people feel like, Addison, Jefferson, Butler, some combination of those three could be on the chopping block, if not restructured. And I guess there is a chance that maybe all three of them are gone, but I just wouldn't, that would leave you pretty thin if all three of those guys were gone. So I would imagine that it's likely going to be, if I'm the Bills and I'm sitting there looking at those three guys, I'd say Addison's a likely restructured contract. Butler is a likely cut contract, and Jefferson is a likely keep guy, unless you really feel like you want to cut him and kind of leave yourself thin. That's kind of how I see it, but I could also see it where they get rid of all three.
Yeah, and he mentions at the end John Ross. John Ross was on my list of a guy. So if John Brown leaves, I think the number one thing I want from an addition of a receiver to this team is I want Isaiah Hodgins to be on the Buffalo Bills in 2021, because I think he's going to add a lot. He's going to add a bigger slot option. He's going to add a guy who can go vertical, from the slot, and a guy who can get open over the middle of the field. And I think Isaiah Hodgins could be one of those players by the end of 2021. We're talking about as a huge part of this team. I really do think that Isaiah Hodgins was one of the steals of that 2020 draft. So I want him on the roster, and I want him on the depth chart in 2021. So in order to feel completely comfortable, I think, with Gabe Davis, because Gabe Davis isn't exactly a burner. Like, say Stephon Diggs gets hurt, and it's Gabe Davis and it's Cole Beasley and it's Isaiah Hodgins. Like, we're missing that burner, a guy on the boundary. So I want to go for like a veteran presence. You mentioned John Ross. He's a speed option that can platoon with Gabe Davis. Damier Byrd from New England, guy you can get cost effective. Kenny Stills can come back. And you're also looking at guys like maybe David Moore from Seattle. So there are some speed options available to sort of platoon with Gabe Davis and take the pressure off Gabe Davis, or at least just be there, break glass in case of emergency if one of Diggs or Davis goes down, because you want to have, I think, that third player who you're comfortable with on the boundary, because you're not going to be comfortable with Cole Beasley on the boundary. And I don't think you're going to be comfortable with Isaiah Hodgins on the boundary. So, yeah, and that sixth guy is probably going to be a return guy, whether it's Isaiah McKenzie or Andre Roberts or, a Jamal Agnew, a guy that could pursue in free agency. It's going to be a smaller guy, probably. Yeah, a guy that you're not going to feel comfortable with on the boundary. So, yeah, John Ross is definitely on that list of guys that could possibly be utilized there. We got a super chat here from Scott as well.
Yeah, it says Ian Rappaport, Feliciano put out, says he doesn't want to play anywhere but Buffalo, but business is business. What happens in this business? Yeah, I think we'll talk about Feliciano and kind of where he shakes out as far as in the tiering for free agent guards that are going to be available. Well, guard, and for his sake, guard with center flex, like he's probably going to get, I know Pierre mentioned like contracts are going to be suppressed a little bit, but I think Feliciano, for timing wise, this is good timing for him to become a free agent. There's not a ton of great guards available in the free agent market that are under 30 years old. I mean, there's a couple big names like Tooney and Scherf that are available, but they're 30 plus. So for Feliciano, it's a good time probably for him to hit the market, and we'll see, if he's willing to kind of come back for a reasonable price. Lucas says, do we honestly have a chance for JJ Watt? And so maybe we transition now. You mentioned Hendrickson to edge.
Yeah.
This is a good segue to kind of move over to edge. Do we honestly have a chance for JJ Watt? And I think we do. For me, JJ Watt is on my list, right? And he's kind of like, if you want to tier him, he's going to be in the top tier, right? He's going to be, whether it's a short-term deal or not, he's going to be commanding, $10+ million, even on a short 10+ million a year, even on a short-term deal, maybe 12, right? I could see him going somewhere for like 2 for 25 or 2 for, somewhere in that range. He's definitely on the list. So I think it comes down to like, how much more are you willing to pay above and beyond that for a guy like Hendrickson, who you can have for a longer term? Are you willing to give a guy like Trey Hendrickson $15 million a year for like 4 years? Or are you more comfortable giving like JJ Watt a 1 or 2 year deal for like 12 million per? I do think we have a chance at them, right? But it again comes down to, do we restructure some of these other guys on the line or cut them? If there's no restructuring or no cutting done of the guys we have, then I don't think we are getting JJ Watt, but it seems inevitable that something like that's going to be happen. So, Watt and Hendrickson were the two guys I kind of had on my tier 1 list. I know you had Hendrickson, obviously, but where do you come out on the JJ Watt piece?
I think either way, because I see some people in the comment section, someone mentioned Melvin Ingram. And another guy you want to look at in the edge market is like a Shaq Barrett or a Yannick Ngakoue. I'm not looking for an Ingram or a Barrett or an Ngakoue. As much as like we talked about them last year, I think after seeing this defense perform this year, I want a power player.
Yeah.
And if the Buffalo Bills do on the interior sort of go after a player like a Tyler Sheldon, say the Buffalo Bills draft Tyler Sheldon in the second round, and you have Sheldon and Starr rotating at the 1 technique, that leaves Ed Oliver at the 3 technique, and then Harrison Phillips, Justin Zimmer. You're missing a little pass rush oomph on the inside if it's just Ed Oliver. So with a guy like JJ Watt, a guy like Trey Hendrickson, a guy like possibly Dietrich Wise in the mid-tier from New England, a guy like Morgan Fox on the mid-tier from the Los Angeles Rams. These are bigger bodied power rushers who I think could line up on the left end opposite Jerry Hughes, add some bigger bodies to this defensive line, and rotate into the 3 technique on pass rushing situations. So you could see a situation where JJ Watt can play inside, Trey Hendrickson can play inside, Morgan Fox can play inside, Dietrich Wise can play inside. These are all guys who can move along the defensive line a little bit more than like a Shaq Barrett or a Yannick Ngakoue, who primarily are going to have to try to line up like sort of that old Jim Schwartz sort of wide 9, like outside of the offensive tackle. So to me, I think JJ Watt 100% would consider coming to Buffalo. And I think it's just what you said. You're weighing the short term, the low risk is JJ Watt. Believe it or not, the low risk is JJ Watt. 1 or 2 years at 8 to 12 million. That's not the biggest risk in the world.
Right.
Trey Hendrickson, he's 27, 26, 25, 27. Yeah. So you're giving him money. You're giving him money to complement Jerry Hughes and then replace Jerry Hughes. Yep. Like that is more of a, you really got to think that he's a long-term answer and he's a key cog on your defense for a long time, as opposed to a guy like JJ Watt, who is just like sort of, I'd say, a longer-term mercenary. And someone mentioned Ndamukong Suh. We mentioned Ndamukong Suh earlier. These mercenary players along the defensive line, that these older players like Derek Wolfe and Tyson Alualu, who you can get on shorter term deals, who can make an impact on your defensive line.
No, I agree. And thanks, Ryan, for the well wishes. Baby's now officially over a week old, getting close to 2 weeks now. So appreciate that. She's been doing great. Don't sleep on Horrible Harry in 2021. He'll be
maybe it was the ACL was just really slowing him down. So that's a good point. I mean, maybe we are underestimating Harrison Phillips. I mean, I look at this defensive line and I see Ed Oliver and I'm excited. I see Starlot Olele and I'm excited. There's a guy who's going to free some more things up for Ed Oliver. I look at Justin Zimmer and I think that's a really good 4th defensive tackle or 5th defensive tackle, an energy guy, a guy who's not going to embarrass himself out there, but a guy who's probably not a starter. And then I see Harrison Phillips and I'm just kind of like, meh. I kind of wish it was a different name there at DT3. So, I mean, Richard, you could be 100% correct. Don't get me wrong. And we'll see what Brandon Beane thinks, and we'll see how it plays out in the 2020 2021 off season. We had another. Did we have another comment here or super chat?
I think that was it.
Oh, okay.
I think we got them all. Okay, so as far as then, we talk about Hendrickson and Watt on the edge. There's a couple mid-tier guys, I think. I mean, I'm going to say this, and I think that he should be a mid-tier, but he's likely thinks of himself as a upper tier, and that's Clowney. I mean, Clowney should be getting under $10 million for a 1-year contract, in my opinion. Clowney should be getting somewhere in the $6 to $8 million range for 1 year. Again, he's been living on these like 1-year contracts lately, but again, that would be a low risk move as well, similar to Watt, and even maybe lower risk because it's less money and it's 1 year. Clowney, I put Morgan Fox, like you mentioned, in that mid-tier deal. I think he's going to get $4 to $5 million a year coming off a 6-sack season, playing in a part-time role. He's, he did play more of that 3-4 end in for the Rams, but I think, like you said, if we could have a guy that could, move into the inside and pass rushing situations and kind of play like a pseudo 3 technique, he's a mid-tier guy. Like, those are two mid-tier guys that I had on my list. I mean, the low tier, like bargain guy I had on my list is a guy I mentioned before, and that's Charles Harris, a former first-round pick. He's coming off his rookie deal. He was traded from Miami to Atlanta. He had some pass rush pop with Atlanta last year with 3 sacks as a part-time player. He's more of a true 4-3 end, but he doesn't have that huge size like some of these other guys you're mentioning. He'd be more of like the, he's kind of more of, I don't want to call him a Jerry Hughes because he's a little bigger than Jerry Hughes, but he's more of like a bendier type red rusher. So,
yeah.
And then guys like Aquara are going to get big money, I feel like, from like Detroit. He's probably
he also seems like a 34 guy to me. Like, I don't know if I trust him. Kind of like Yannick, kind of like Shaq Barrett. I just don't know if that's the type of defensive end that I want to go for.
Carl Lawson's another guy who's going to get probably like 6 to 8 million, which I'm not a fan of signing him. I know some people have mentioned him, but I just don't see the production. I mean, 5.5 sacks, I get it last year, but I wouldn't be getting close to spending $10 million a year on that guy. So that's just me.
Let's 1 second. We're going to get to Brian's super chat in a second, but Richard said Clowney's a run stuffer, nothing more. I mean, how much did we miss Shaq Lawson last year? So again, if you can get Clowney as a mercenary, 1 year, $6 million, a guy who wants to come here and rebuild his reputation, he could probably provide to you what Shaq Lawson used to provide this defense on a 1-year deal where there's very low risk, towards the future. Like a Shaq Lawson.
He's low risk. I mean, that's the thing. Don't expect Clowney number 1 overall draft pick from whatever year it was. Like that's not what you're expecting when you sign him. You're expecting
Shaq
a guy who can play well against the run, a guy who can maybe give you 5 sacks. Like that's what he is now. I mean, so you pay $6 to $8 million for that and for 1 year, and it's really not. It's not an overpay in my opinion.
And the thing with him too is if you can get him on a 1-year deal under 10 million, he thinks he's more than that, right? So he's going to go out there and he's going to play like a dog for you, trying to prove to the world that he's worth more than that. The last name I had on my list was Ronald Blair from San Francisco. I liked him. He had the ACL injury. He's missed some time. But the thing to me is, like, I look at these bargain bin free agents, guys like Ronald Blair, and then I look at the Buffalo Bills roster and I look at names like Mike Love and Daryl Johnson and Brian Cox Jr. It's go big or go home for the Buffalo Bills at edge rusher. It's a big name free agent, a mid-tier free agent, or it's a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick. To me, it's go big or go home because I don't mind the depth on the defensive line. Like Brian Cox Jr., Mike Love, Daryl Johnson, they're just as good as anything you're going to get in the 4th or the 5th round of the draft. They're just as good as anything you're going to get in the bargain bin of free agency. So unless you go out and you're looking for a mercenary, you're looking for a mid-tier guy, or you're looking for a big money guy, you're just wasting your time at edge, in my opinion, with those 3 guys at the bottom half of the roster.
Agreed. And this is another good segue here.
Yeah, we had a great segue here from Brian Bowers. He says, let's be realistic about Milano. He's gone, right? If we do not really want to pay him $14 million a year, can't stay healthy, has never made a Pro Bowl. And that's really interesting. One of the things that I've been toying with, and I don't think Matt Milano's going to get $14 million a year. Like, there are some teams with some money that could use him, teams like the Colts. So don't get me wrong. It only takes one team to go out there and throw the money at him. But, I think Matt Milano's market is going to be in the $10 to $12 million range. And if you're the Buffalo Bills and Matt Milano's like looking at the market and he's testing the market, I really think there's a scenario where Matt Milano could test the market, be getting some decent, 10, 11, $12 million offers by some teams, but they're not like competitive teams. And the Buffalo Bills might go to him and say, hey, can you take $8 million this year because we're so tight up against the cap? And then we'll give you $12 million next year and $13 million the year after. So pay him more in the future and sort of shortchange him a little bit in the short term, but give him some length to that contract, maybe give him some more guarantees, some more bonuses. But that's where his injury history starts to scare you a little bit. So I don't think it's a lost cause to think that Matt Milano could be back for the Buffalo Bills in 2020 or 2021, but I put it at about a 40% shot.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I mean, he obviously kind of headlines my list of
top
linebackers available.
It's a waste of time talking about like Levante David and stuff because those guys, Avery Williamson, if the Buffalo Bills are going big at linebacker, it is Matt Milano.
It is Matt Milano. Exactly. So there's the tier one guys is one guy, and it's Matt Milano. Otherwise, this is either going to be solved through mid-tier, low-tier, or through the draft. And let me just quickly get to this other super chat from Josh Richardson. We need to cut Mitch Morse. He's trash and always injured. We're going to get to offensive line here.
We'll do interior offensive line next. Because I feel like maybe we shortchanged Scott a little bit with the Feliciano commentary. So we'll get to that next.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. But as far as linebackers, I'm with you. There's one tier one guy, and that's Milano. The mid-tier guy that I kind of like, and I mentioned him before, is Kevin Pierre-Louis from Washington. Great coverage linebacker. He's 30 years old, made $3 million in 2020, entering his age 30 season. If Milano leaves, Pierre-Louis could be a nice option. That Washington defense was really good in 2020. Obviously, Ron Rivera, coach defense, was going to be a very similar scheme to what McDermott's running. He could be our 4-3 weak side backer at age 30 and may not cost you a ton. And if you're looking really for coverage backers, he's up there, graded out as the 15th best linebacker overall for PFF in 2020. So Kevin Pierre-Louis will be a guy that if Milano walks and you can't get him back, he could be a decently priced consolation option.
Yeah, I actually had him in my bargain bin because I don't see teams like throwing money at Kevin Pierre-Louis. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, that's even better, right?
Yeah. The name that sticks out to me the most is Neville Hewitt.
I think I know you're a big Neville Hewitt guy.
He's going to cost. He's always, whenever we play the Jets, he's always sticks out to me. And he always sticks out like as a little out of place in the 34 Greg Williams defense too. Like a guy who could be so much more productive if put into a different scheme, like say the one that the Buffalo Bills run, where he can use his sideline to sideline athleticism a little bit more and drop back a little bit more. But Neville Hewitt, somebody said a lower tier free agency in the comment section. This is the guy who, even though it's a box score statistic, he led all free agent linebackers and tackles. So my opinion is Neville Hewitt's probably going to cost you $6 to $8 million. You could probably get him on a shorter term deal, 2-3 years. But I would love a guy like Neville Hewitt, a guy who might be cheaper, a guy who you need to do a little bit of a reclamation project on because he struggled again in a 34 defense in Arizona, is Devondre Campbell. He's another guy who he was relatively good in that 43 defense in Atlanta and then struggled a little bit in Arizona playing the inside of that 34. But there's a name that I want to mention. And I think this is a name that we're forgetting. And when we're talking about Matt Milano, I think that this is something we're forgetting too. And that name is Raphael Bush. Remember Raphael Bush?
Oh, I remember him.
Well, 5'11", 200-pound Raphael Bush. And I think that we look so much for star power. Like we're looking for the names, right?
We do.
We want to add the name. We want to feel safe. We want to feel comfortable heading into next season. We want a higher draft pick or a guy with name recognition. But that Buffalo Bills defense 3 years ago with Preston Brown and Raphael Bush and Ramon Humber, they didn't exactly embarrass themselves, and they were a quality defense in the National Football League. You look around the league at some of the better teams in football. Kansas City, it's not exactly like outside of Chris Jones and Frank Clark. They have a lot of names on that defense. You look at Tampa Bay, every single person in that defensive backfield was a middle round draft pick. We seek comfort. We seek comfort in name recognition when sometimes, we don't have to focus on the biggest names And I look at it like maybe we chase a Keanu Neil if we're willing to pay more money. Maybe we look at a Sean Williams, who's a free agent from Cincinnati. If we can add sort of that hybrid safety linebacker, a guy who can play the box, we can probably survive with an AJ Klein and a Deron Lee, or an AJ Klein and a Kevin Pierre-Louis, and then draft a guy in the second or the third round and just have some kind of rotation there behind your defensive line, and you'll be completely okay. You'll be completely fine. So for me, I feel like we should let Matt Milano walk. What are your thoughts?
I kind of feel the same. I really do, just because I'm all about, like, my philosophy again this year has been about addressing the trenches in the draft. But I also like a lot of like the linebacker sort of safety hybrid types in this draft class as well. I'm a big Hamza guy. I know that, there's a lot of good linebackers that we have coming out in the draft. I mean, there's an outside chance that a guy like Owusu, maybe makes it to us at 30. I doubt it, but I mean, there's also a lot of safety players that I feel like could be, decent options for the Bills as far as if they're trying to fill that kind of coverage role. Hamza's one of them. Obviously, you mentioned, you like Tufanoa. I don't know if he's like the perfect guy for that role, but there are others, right? I mean, I like, he's not necessarily a scheme fit, but for Trevon Moehrig, the Jim Thorpe Award winner, I mean, that guy is probably going to be able to play anywhere on a defense, safety, linebacker, but the money is what it comes down to. If Milano is willing to take the $8 million, let's say this year, and then take it more into the future, then maybe. But again, it's hard for me to quantify so much. Like, yes, people will say we lost the games Milano didn't play. Milano didn't play in this year, but we also really didn't play that great in defense in a couple of the games he did play, and we won, right? So it's like, how much he was good in coverage against Mark Andrews in that playoff game. He wasn't great against the Colts, okay? And obviously against the Chiefs, the entire defense got smoked, right? So my philosophy is more about trenches. Get me more of a safety linebacker hybrid type that can cover. And if Milano has to walk, so be it. I wish him the best of luck. I'd love to have him back, but for the money, I just see there's going to be some team that wants to overpay him. So that's kind of where I come out.
Because here's my question for you. Would you rather have Curtis Samuel or Matt Milano?
In a world where John Brown's not back, I'd rather have Curtis Samuel.
I'd rather have Curtis Samuel too, just because I think that Curtis Samuel could impact a game more than Matt Milano. Like, I like Matt Milano. He makes me feel nice and safe and warm and fuzzy inside knowing he's on the Buffalo Bills defense. But I think that a guy like Curtis Samuel could have more of an impact on the game with what he brings to your offense. Would you rather have Trey Hendrickson or Matt Milano?
Trey Hendrickson. I mean,
all
day, every day.
Yeah, like there are just names that I think that I'd rather have than Matt Milano. And you could go out, and you could either add Curtis Samuel or Trey Hendrickson with that Matt Milano money, and then you can go out and you can sign Malcolm Smith or Kevin Pierre-Louis or Deron Lee or like a Nate Gary from Philadelphia. Guys who aren't the greatest outside linebackers in the world, but have played in the National Football League and don't embarrass themselves either. And then you'd have AJ Klein, Tremaine Edmonds, and we'll use Kevin Pierre-Louis in this scenario as your linebackers. But then in the draft, in the second or third round, you could take Hamza. You could take Chaz Surratt, Nick Bolton, the guy from Notre Dame, Owusu, could drop.
Jabril Cox.
Jabril Cox.
Jabril Cox could be.
So Tony Fields in the third or the fourth round. I know we don't have a fourth round pick, but if we trade back, we could have a fourth round pick. So, I would rather live in a world where we have Curtis Samuel on offense and a mid-round draft pick and Kevin Pierre-Louis platooning with maybe a bigger safety brought in, a third safety brought in, and sort of just making it work on the defensive side of the ball, or adding that premier pass rusher in Trey Hendrickson, than I think, having a Matt Milano type. And Cameron McGrone is nice too. He's more of a project, so that fits in even more. you know, because he's a guy you can bring along slowly. There was a comment from Randy Hardman. This can't be real. This Craig Taint Itch outside linebacker, Ball State. There's no way that's real, right, Randy? Like that is if that's real, I have a new favorite player in this draft, but I don't think it's real. But yeah, I just think that there are other players that I would rather pay money to than
I
than
think
Matt
you're
Milano.
I think you're more likely to be able to replace Milano through the draft than you are to be able to get a Trey Hendrickson who can immediately produce from day one from the draft. That's just, I mean, that's my personal opinion. People can disagree, that's fine, but that's how I feel. And I feel like the linebacker class is deep enough to where you can get someone serviceable, or you can sign a Pierre Lewis in free agency to cover up, you know, again, Pierre Lewis, great coverage linebacker. I mean, and Richard says, what about Keanu Neil? You've mentioned this. You mentioned this probably first, or maybe even Richard
one of the people in the
comments
section mentioned it first. I don't remember who exactly mentioned
so this
it.
Was an idea.
I think it might have been Spin.
But I feel like Air Raid Hour was the first to market on the Keanu Neil idea, and I think people are jumping on it now. So you know, he's got the injury history, and he played on a defense that really in the back end wasn't great in Atlanta last year, but change of scenery. He's got an aggressive kind of demeanor to him. He is willing to come up and make some hits in the box, kind of like a Deion Buchanan type. So yeah, I'm okay with that kind of move if the Bills feel like that for the price they can get a guy like Keanu Neil in here and to fill that role.
Yeah, no, I mean, Keanu Neal's my number one in that role. Like, because I really am interested in adding a third safety. So whether it's Keanu and that third safety, with the caveat being that third safety is more of a box safety than more of a center field, like a high type safety, just so he can do exactly that. Maybe replace a little bit of what you're losing in Matt Milano. But I look at some other names. Carl Joseph, Spotrac has him getting a $7 million contract. I don't know if I buy it. He only played 8 games last year in Cleveland. Carl Joseph is another guy like Keanu Neil, smaller, more of a Raphael Bush type than a Keanu Neil type. Xavier Woods from Dallas is another guy who can do a bunch from the safety position. Sean Williams from Cincinnati is another one. And then Cameron Sutton from Pittsburgh. This is a guy, speak about versatility. This is a guy who was a higher draft pick, I believe. Middle round draft pick from, out of Tennessee, was a relatively he was a very, what's I'm looking for? He was a prospect where a bunch of people had different opinions on him, but people were pretty high on him. And this is a guy who sat on the bench a lot of his early career in Pittsburgh, but then started to play this year. He can play inside at nickel. He can play outside at outside corner, and he's played a little bit of box safety for them. So this is a guy who did it all in Pittsburgh. He did it all in very small sample sizes, but he did it all. So Cameron Sutton is another name that really interests me because there's a lot of safeties in this free agent class, and there's not a lot of linebackers in this free agent class.
Right.
So if you're looking for market inefficiencies, where are you probably going to save some money? You're probably going to save your money going after a third safety as opposed to going and trying to replace Matt Milano in free agency. So I believe
the Bills have some precedent here from doing that in a much lower, much lower market when they brought Maurice Alexander in here, kind of that hybrid linebacker safety type. Obviously he was like bottom of the roster type guy, but the inefficiencies, like you mentioned, could be had. Ryan Teal says, I think Micah Parsons goes early after opting out.
Oh, he's going to go in the top. I say the farthest he drops is maybe into the Tremaine Edmonds area, like 15 to 20, but I highly, highly, highly doubt it. Like, this dude's probably going to be a top 10 pick, but there is volatility in the draft this year because players opted out. There's not as much film. There's not a combine. There's not these in-person interviews. So, things will be different this year, and you will see NFL GMs with tons of different draft boards. But at the end of the day, I don't think Micah Parsons gets to us at 30. And I don't think you want to use the capital to trade up for Micah Parsons. The only scenario in which I can see the Buffalo Bills wanting to use the capital to trade up for Micah Parsons is if they, in their heart of hearts, don't think Tremaine Edmonds is the answer, and they're going to let Tremaine Edmonds walk,
or if they want
2 years,
Or move Tremaine outside. I mean,
Outside.
that's the only other.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Parsons is going to come in and be a middle linebacker in a 4-3. Like you have. So Joe says, when are you getting Champ Stamp Judge?
Don't
Yeah,
worry,
that's
it's
true.
coming. Don't worry, it's coming. I didn't forget. Like I said, I'm actually working on another tattoo right now that I'm going to be getting. And once I finalize that tattoo, probably early summer, I'll be getting that tattoo and I'll be getting the JA17 on me butt cheek. So don't worry, Joe. Yes, I am putting it off till the summer, but only because I want to go for that all 2-for-1. And I like
Discount.
sitting. I'm a big fan of sitting. I do a lot of sitting at work. I feel like if I get a tattoo on my ass right now, it's gonna be hard to sit. So
Yeah, that's true.
I'm
You're gonna be in
gonna
pain
wait
there.
a little. I'm gonna wait a little while on that, but I will be getting it. I'm a man of my word. I will get the tattoo. Interior offensive line. We wanted to transition back to that a little bit. A couple of people mentioned cut Mitch Morse. A couple Scott Vanaloo mentioned John Feliciano. If I'm the Buffalo Bills, like John Feliciano says he wants to come back, but Spot Track values him at $8 million. Good teams don't pay John Feliciano's $8 million. They don't.
Correct.
Like, and people are like, but he's the toughest guy on the interior offensive line. He's the heart and soul. He's got center guard versatility. I don't care. Good teams go out in the draft and find a replacement for John Feliciano without batting an eye. Good teams go out and they find a free agent on the free agent market, like we found John Feliciano on the free agent market for practically no money and replace him. So to me, I'm not paying a dime over $4 million for John Feliciano. How about yourself?
I totally agree. I mean, if you're going to go big on a freaking guard and you're going to pay him $8 million, go ahead and pay Brandon Scherf the 12 to 14. If you want the best guard in the free agent class, which is not going to happen. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I mean, that's what I would do if you're like sitting there thinking about like where you're going to spend your money. I think this position screams draft to me. Like interior offensive line screams draft. There's a lot of guys, at least that I like on the interior. You know, I'm a big Wyatt Davis guy, but there's other guys. Landon Dickerson, if you want a guy who's got center guard flex potentially in the draft in the second, third round. Creed Humphrey is a guy that people like. He could probably start out as a guard and then maybe be the heir apparent to Mitch Morse down the road. So you have options through the draft, and interior offensive line in the draft is probably, other than punter and kicker, it's kind of like the least valued commodity, I would say, unless there's just an absolute stud like a new Potty years ago, right? But you're being able to get a decent interior offensive lineman in this draft in the second or third round that would give you long-term center flex if that's what you're really looking for. Or you're going to be able to go out in free agency, like you said, and find the next John Feliciano, whether that's a Michael Schofield, who's got guard tackle flex, who's a little bit older, or a Chris Reed from the Panthers, or maybe even you go out and you sign a DJ Fluker for another 1-year deal like he had with the Ravens this year, who's a former first rounder. So, the Ravens were the number 1 rushing offense in the league. DJ Fluker played part-time role. Like, there are ways you can replace John Feliciano in 2021 without costing your team $8 million.
Yeah, we got a couple people. We got a couple people saying get rid of Mitch Morse, sign Feliciano to bigger money, but move him to center. Steve Rose comes in and says, "Morse
Can I go on record and say no to the Feliciano at center as the solution here? I don't want that.
And
no.
Steve Rose makes a good comment here. People with the first name Steve generally make smart comments, and he says Morse is one of the best centers in the league. Mongo gave up 7 pressures when he filled in at center. Just cutting Morse makes your O-line considerably worse, and moving Mongo there isn't the answer. This is where it gets tough.
Pierre disagrees with me on this. Pierre wants to trade Morse and move Mongo. Like a lot of people do. A lot of people.
Here's where it gets tricky, though. And here's where the balancing act comes in. The Buffalo Bills want to improve their running game, right? So John Feliciano gave up more pressures, but John Feliciano is also more stout against 330-pound defensive tackles than Mitch Morse is. So Mitch Morse is one of, if not the best, pass blocking offensive, centers in the National Football League. He's top 5 for sure. That's why we paid him. He came from Kansas City. He blocked for Patrick Mahomes. He's a really good pass blocking center, but he can get pushed around by some of those bigger bodies inside, which negatively affects your run game, especially when you can't get him out and pull. So do the Buffalo Bills think that they can scheme it differently next year? So, Mitch Morse can be more effective or more efficient pass blocking? Or do they go out and try to find a center who is a better run blocker? Like, do you just surround him with bigger guards? Do you replace him? Like, these are the questions that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott are going to ask themselves. Mitch Morse, I believe it's a $4 million dead cap hit and $6 million in saving, or maybe vice versa. It's about a 50-50 split about how much money you save and how much money you lose. So Pierre says, hard to convince me Mitch Morse is highest paid center in the NFL. We need to cut the money somewhere. I don't disagree with that, but here's what I will say. The Buffalo Bills weren't wrong for paying him when they did. Josh Allen, a young quarterback, needed that center. So when we made that move, it was a good move, and nobody foresaw COVID-19 coming. It's not the worst contract in the world that they gave him. So, I think the second half of this draft, the second round of this draft is a sweet spot. Creed Humphrey, Wyatt Davis, Landon Dickerson, who does have that injury history, as Corey mentions. There's a bunch of guys in that second round who can make an immediate impact on the interior. But we also need to remember we only have 3 picks in the first 3 rounds. And if we trade back, we still only have 3 picks. We probably pick up a 4th rounder. So we talk about let's draft a defensive tackle. Let's draft a guard. Let's draft an edge rusher. Let's draft a corner. Like, only got 3 of those things to go around. Many picks. And you got to hit on those 3. Like, who knows how the board's going to fall? Like, what if a player who's just so good at another position is sticking out on the board? I have a name I want to throw out. And this could solve a ton of problems. Austin Blythe from the Los Angeles Rams. I got a lot of Los Angeles Ram free agents on my wish list. You do. Because they've been really good. Les Snead's been really, he's been really good at, like, you see, they trade a lot of draft capital. 1 first-round draft pick in 7 years. Trading for Jalen Ramsey, paying Aaron Donald, paying those guys that they do at wide receiver like Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, and obviously having paid Jared Goff and now Matt Stafford. Like, that's a team that needs to find cost-effective, cost-efficient players. Austin Blythe is a guy who started his career at guard, was an effective guard. You know that they run block in Los Angeles, and they run block efficiently. And then he moved to center this year, and he didn't embarrass himself. So whether it's signing Mongo, re-signing Mongo, and cutting Morse, and having John Feliciano at right guard and Austin Blythe at center, or it's retaining Mitch Morse and having Austin Blythe replace John Feliciano, because I also think Austin Blythe is better than John Feliciano. You're probably gonna have to pay him in the $6 to $8 million range as well, but I think he's better. And I think Austin Blythe is a guy who you can play at guard. He's there in case of an injury to Mitch Morse, and then he could also possibly replace Mitch Morse in the future if anything happens to Mitch Morse. So I'd rather go and give my $6 to $8 million to an Austin Blythe than I would a John Feliciano.
I agree. No, I totally agree with that.
And just going along, I don't know who you have in your mid-tier of free agents. Elijah Wilkinson from Denver. He's a favorite of Mike Munchak. He's got right guard, right tackle flex. So he's more of a position flex too. He's a guy who can play for Daryl Williams. He's a guy who can fill in at right guard. You could sign Mike Iupati to a 1-year mercenary deal to play left guard, and then have Cody Ford over at right guard and have Mitch Morse at center, or draft a guy, Alex Mack. Yes, he's a center, but maybe he could transition to guard. I feel like there are guys, Joe Haig, right guard, right tackle flex. I feel like there are guys you can find that can produce somewhat similar to what John Feliciano does without having to pay him $8 million. I just, Nick Easton and Lane Taylor are 2 guys who, with an injury history, who you could pick up on the real cheap. And if they can stay healthy, can give you something. So those are 2 guys you can take flyers on. And you mentioned Schofield. So there are just a ton of guys, I think, that you could go in and get for way less money. We like John Feliciano because he's Josh Allen's best friend. We like John Feliciano because he's got like an edge to his game. We we overlook the fact that he's a replacement level player because of those two things.
No, I agree. And I mean, you know, Upati was a guy I mentioned as a bargain bin. I think you could get him for on like $2 million a year on a 1-year contract. 1 year, $2 million. I mentioned Schofield. He's got the tackle flex. Chris Reed, another Panthers guy who can play left or right guard. Probably not going to hit the market because the Panthers are probably going to re-sign him to be their starting left guard. But Pierre comes in and says it would make sense to trade Morse instead of cutting to get an entire contract off books. If we had to cut Morse, we might as well restructure a contract and keep.
Pierre, that's not how it works. All the guaranteed money in that contract, the Buffalo Bills have to pay. Like when Jared Goff was traded to Detroit, the LA Rams still took a massive cap hit. Right now, the reason why the Philadelphia Eagles are asking so much for Carson Wentz is because when they trade Carson Wentz, it's a $36 million cap hit. So not only is Philadelphia giving up Carson Wentz, they're giving up $36 million in a cap hit. And that's why they want so many resources back. So all that guaranteed money to Mitch Morse, all those cap hits, trading Mitch Morse is the same as cutting him. It's the same as cutting him. You're still taking that dead cap hit.
I'm for the record, keep Mitch Morse. I don't have any, I like what he gives us. We're a passing heavy team. I know we want to get better in the run game. I feel like that is possible. You put 2 really good guards on either side of Mitch Morse, you'll be fine. That's my view. He's an elite pass blocking center, like you said, and like that's number one priority. He's got the good relationship with Josh Allen as far as being the center quarterback relationship. You're not going to get, I mean, yes, you're paying him like he should be good at both, but that's just not the reality right now. You put 2 really good guards on either side of him, which I think will be easier to find than it is to find a replacement center of his caliber, regardless of what you feel about him in the run blocking game. It's just going to be easier for you and probably more cost effective to find some guards. And like you said, Austin Blythe, a guard with center flex, other guys like Alex Mack with center flex. So I'm kind of with you there.
And speaking of paying Mongo, I right now think it's a balancing game between Daryl Williams and Mongo, because I don't think you can afford both. I don't think you're going to get both of these guys in here unless Daryl Williams takes $8 million and John Feliciano takes $4 million. They take some hometown discounts. I don't think you're keeping both of these guys. So let's transition to offensive tackle a little bit. I think if the Buffalo Bills pursue a big money offensive tackle, it's Daryl Williams and Daryl Williams only, correct?
Daryl Williams only. We can pipe dream about Taylor Moton, but he's going to stay in Carolina.
He's going to get a moton of money.
Yeah.
From Carolina.
I mean, unless you want to, like I said, my guy Roderick Johnson, unless you want to pay him $6 to $8 million for like 4 years and say like you're our starting right tackle for the future, a guy that's only 26, I agree with you. Daryl Williams is really the only other guy that's in that mid tier. I would say there's a couple bargain guys, but mid tier, I'm with you. He'd be the only guy I really want back for that price.
And here's where I'm starting. Here's where I'm struggling. I want Daryl Williams back more than I want John Feliciano back. I want Daryl Williams back more than I think I want Matt Milano back. I think Matt Milano is a better player than Daryl Williams. I think Matt Milano is more of an impactful player at the position he plays than Daryl Williams is an impactful player at the position he plays. But pass blocking for Josh Allen is important. And I think Daryl Williams did a solid job last year. So Daryl Williams is my number one guy that I want to bring back, but I also don't know if I want to pay that much money to a right tackle. You mentioned Roderick Johnson. Right? You can probably get away with paying Roderick Johnson $4 to $6 million. And if he plays up to his upside, that's a bargain deal. And you've just replaced Daryl Williams for half the price. You look at guys in the free agent market. Kelvin Beachum stepped in this year in Arizona, didn't embarrass himself. You could sign a guy like Kelvin Beachum or DeMar Dodson to 1-year deals and then pair them with a rookie. Draft a guy like Walker Little in the 2nd or the 3rd round. So you'd pair a rookie with an older guy like Kelvin Beachum or DeMar Dodson.
Yep.
You got James Hurst. James Hurst. A lot of people look at James Hurst as a swing tackle who's also got left guard flex. But I mean, this is a guy who in very limited snaps, don't get me wrong, 242 snaps, only allowed 6 pressures. That guy is a stopgap right tackle. He probably could be a stopgap right tackle for half the price of Daryl Williams.
He's a great pass blocker too.
Matt Filer from Pittsburgh. He shifted into guard this year, but could also play right tackle. So there are a ton of mid-tier guys who could probably step in for the Buffalo Bills and be solid pass blocking right tackles. But then you also start to think to yourself, Well, what about run blocking? Like, what about this? What about that? Because we do need to be more efficient run blockers. But to me, at this point, I don't think run blocking is the players. I think we got to change up. We got to change up what we're doing in the scheme. What do you think?
No, I agree. Another guy kind of like as a mid-tier is Kendall Lamb from Cleveland. He can be a swing. He could be like your new Ty and Secchi, or even if you wanted to pay him at least short term to be your starting right tackle, you could. Obviously, we know Cleveland was a very good running team. Lamb was not the starter, but he did come in spots where guys were injured on that Cleveland offensive line. Scheme is the question, right? It's scheme versus personnel. What do you do? Do you change the scheme? It's the chicken and egg. Did we not run the ball much or effectively because of the personnel, or did we not run the ball much because we decided that wasn't going to be an area of focus, right? So is it the players causing us to do what we're doing, or is it the personnel, or is it the scheme dictating that we don't need the players that are that strong at those, those types? I personally believe we need to get a little bit more aggressive and powerful with our line, our up front running the ball. I'm not saying, and this is what everyone's saying, like, so it's not new. Everyone's saying run it more effectively, not more often. Like, I get that. But in order to run it more effectively, you need better offensive line play, right? You need a combination of better offensive line play, and maybe you need an upgrade at the running back position. But I would rather take the route of, let's see if a better offensive line will help the current running backs on the roster before we take a running back and try to band-aid the fact that our offensive line needs to be better run blocking. So I'm with you. I think something schematically needs to change, because clearly whatever they were doing last year with the personnel we had wasn't working effectively. So yeah, I would have to agree with what you said.
Here's another guy you could sign. Here's another name. I got one more name for you. This is a guy who said he wants to play one more year in the National Football League, and he wants to play for a contender. My guess is he'd probably sign a contract somewhere in the $4 to $5 million range for 1 year. Former Buffalo Bill, Jason Peters. At this point in his career, he's probably a right guard or a tackle. He signed with Philadelphia again to play right guard. After some injuries, he moved to left tackle. But this is a guy who is a veteran. It's a guy who has been around the league a long time. If he's still got something left in the tank, a veteran like Jason Peters could be a 1-year stopgap option if we want to utilize like our draft resources somewhere else. So that is something to consider as well. Ryan Teal says Bean is the master of restructuring and of 1-year deals. I don't disagree. And that's why, like we talked about at the top of the show, we expect the Buffalo Bills to have about $30 to $40 million to play with in free agency after you take the draft money away, because we think Brandon Bean is going to go around and he's going to be restructuring a lot of deals and releasing some players. So, that's something. And then in terms of 1-year deals, Pierre mentioned it earlier in the comment section. We might be overhyping how much money some of these guys are going to get this year because of how low the cap is. The New Orleans Saints just got Drew Brees to give up $24 million and then just cut Nick Easton and save $6 million. And they're still $55 million over the salary cap for next year. The New Orleans Saints, I literally can't picture how the New Orleans Saints are going to field a roster in 2021, because if they have to cut every single player on their team, even the dead cap, I don't even know. I have no idea how they're going to get under this. Philly's in the same predicament as well. So, Randy says hard pass for Jason Peters. I got one last question for you on the interior offensive line. I forgot to mention it when we were talking about guard play. Cody Ford. Obviously, guys like Bruce Nolan at Buffalo Rumblings and a lot of other people have made this point. The Buffalo Bills need to pick a position and keep him there. I don't think the Buffalo Bills can pick a position for him yet until after free agency in the draft, because, what if Wyatt Davis is the best player on the board for the Buffalo Bills at 30 and they can't trade back? That's right guard. So Cody Ford would be your left guard. What if we can't re-sign Daryl Williams? Maybe you have to trot Cody Ford out at right tackle again, or at least make him your backup right tackle and hope if the stopgap DeMar Dodson or something you sign can be signed. And then the other one is, Randy said, left guard. Put him back at left guard, which, in a perfect world, you'd have Mongo at right guard, Daryl Williams at right tackle, Morse at center, and then Cody Ford at left guard. That's, something the Buffalo Bills might want to consider. But what if we draft Creed Humphrey? Left-handed center. My guess is he'd probably want to play left guard. So then Cody Ford would become your right guard. So I think it would be ideal for him to start in OTAs, but I just don't know if that's an option. We might have to wait until the draft is over before we pick a position for Cody Ford. But all that aside, do you think Cody Ford is redeemable? Do you think he'll be a quality guard in the National Football League?
I think there is potential for him to be redeemable. I'm not going to say he is redeemable. I think the window's still open for him to prove himself. I think that if you can get him like you said, like a lot of people are saying, if you can get him in there at left guard and he can play there all year and he's sandwiched between Dawkins and let's just assume Morse, and he's got another year. I mean, he's going into his third year, right? So yes, there is still potential for him to be a serviceable left guard. I think, and this is just me, I don't know that he at this point will ever be an elite left guard. I just don't know. Like, I mean, he may prove me wrong. But I think we would have seen some flashes of elite play at guard already if he had that potential to be that elite guard. Now, that doesn't mean he can't be a serviceable guard and a guard that's going to be reliable for multiple years, but it just depends on your perspective, right? If you see a guy that you traded up for in the second round as a serviceable guard for years and you're okay with that, then you're happy with it. If you're seeing as a guy that you traded up for in the second round that should be elite, then maybe you're not so happy with it. So it kind of just depends on where you feel on that kind of cost benefit spectrum. But if he's a serviceable left guard, like of the caliber that can not embarrass himself and kind of be steady for years, then I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I just like the point I'm trying to make, because I asked a bunch of people this on Twitter. They're like, yeah, I feel like Cody Ford's going to find his rhythm and he'll be a good guard. And I said to them, like, then why in the hell would you want to re-sign John Feliciano? Like, if you think Cody Ford is redeemable at guard and you think he's going to be a solid guard in 2020, why waste that money on Feliciano? Ryan Teal coming in saying, can't the owners just pay behind closed doors? No, we can't all be, only the New England Patriots, only the New England Patriots, who for years invested in TB12 and the TB12 brand, while Tom Brady took pay cuts. Those are the only, that's the only team that's allowed to do that. But all right, we only got a couple position groups left: running back, tight end, and cornerback. Let's move a little bit. Let's move to running back now, since we just got done talking about the offensive line, and there's that sort of back and forth about what's better. Is it what's the problem? Is it the offensive line? Is it the running back? Is it the scheme? Is it a combination of all three? In all likelihood, it's probably a combination of all three. Obviously, Devin Singletary and Zach Moss are limited. They're third-round picks. Their round picks are usually limited. Our offensive line could have blocked better. Yes, they definitely could have blocked better. All of those can be true, but you also can redeem it. So, is there a running back? I got Aaron Jones listed. Like, the Aaron Jones is the guy who can catch the ball in the backfield. He's the guy who can run the football. He's the guy who scores touchdowns. Do you invest $10-11 million in an Aaron Jones, sort of like you would in a Curtis Samuel, to try to just literally add another piece to this offense where it's just like, well, can't cover him. Can't cover them all. Can't do it.
If you're dead set on the philosophy that you're not taking a running back early in the draft, then I could maybe see that. If you sit there and say, you know what, we're going to sign Aaron Jones, and then in the draft, with our first two picks, we're going to draft Wyatt Davis and, I don't know, Creed Humphrey or something with our first two picks, right? Like, if you do something like that, then I could see it, but I just don't see it as like money well spent for the Bills. Like, Bean's already come out and said, like, reading between the lines, he pretty much said, like, we didn't feel like the issue was with our running backs, which leads me to believe that they're going to be fine kind of continuing to draft these like middle round running backs and kind of living and dying by that, especially with how pass heavy they are. Now, I would love a guy like Aaron Jones because he's super dynamic and, like you said, can run, can catch. But he's going to cost you, like you said, $10 million a year. And are you going to spend $10 million a year on a running back if you're Brandon Bean? Probably not, right? Probably not. If you were in a normal cap situation and you felt good about your offensive line already, and you felt like you were missing a running back as kind of a piece, like, the Chiefs maybe felt they were when they drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or like other teams when they sign running backs to like pretty big money, then maybe. But I think, Richard Rush says John Fina said it was a scheme, and I trust him. So yes, a good running back can cover up some deficiencies on your offensive line, but I'd rather be in a situation where my offensive line is steady and I can basically take a running back that's good, maybe not elite, and put him in there and he'll get the job done.
And that's why I think, like, if we're looking at running back, I think we're looking at middle rounds of the draft, or we're looking at bargain bin free agents, someone to come in and take TJ Yeldon's spot. Who knows? Maybe the Buffalo Bills even re-sign TJ Yeldon. But I think the chances are limited, but I do like some of the middle tier running backs. I think Kenyon Drake for $6 million a year, if you can get him for that low, is a playmaking dynamic talent who can return kicks. He can catch the ball in the backfield. He's got that speed. He can score a touchdown on every play. I look at Philip Lindsay as a running back with some, with 4.4 speed, a guy who's a really gritty runner. He reminds me of sort of like a smaller version, obviously, but a modern day Fred Jackson, of like that UDFA style player who comes in is going to have
faster than Fred Jackson too.
A lot faster. Yeah. Sort of just the story of Philip Lindsay is kind of what reminds me of Fred Jackson, a guy who's always going to be criminally underlooked. And Jamal Williams from Green Bay is a guy who can run the ball, he can catch the ball, he can pass protect. So there are some middle tier running backs, but I don't foresee the Buffalo Bills paying, $4 to $6 million for any of these players. I think it's more going to be the 1 year deal, the TJ Yeldon 2-year type of deal. Do you have that same thought process in your mind?
Yeah. I mean, I like the guys you mentioned. Tyler Irvin, another guy I mentioned before, as a guy who can kind of help you in the return game and is like a running back with some speed. It's a little bit more of like a super poor man's Curtis Samuel, I would say, because he can play a little receiver as well. That's the type of guy I think you're probably looking at to replace the TJ Yeldon. I mean, I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not saying it's a great fit or it's really like something the Bills should do, but they did go after Le'Veon Bell at the trade deadline. It was reported. So Le'Veon Bell's value is as low as it's ever been. Okay. He's not the fastest guy, but he's a guy that can mask some deficiencies in an offensive line. Like, he is one of the few guys with the patience that he has that can mask a few deficiencies. And honestly, he's probably going to command less dollars than a Kenyon Drake and an Aaron Jones. So maybe Le'Veon Bell is willing to do another 1 year deal somewhere to kind of rebuild his value. He's still only 28, and maybe try to cash in one more contract after that. Now, don't say like, hey, Tilt wants the Bills to sign Le'Veon Bell. I'm just saying they did go after him reportedly during the trade deadline. He is available. His value is depressed from a cost standpoint. So I'm just saying, like, he's out there. Okay.
Another guy whose value could be depressed is Marlon Mack. But Marlon Mack has never been much of a pass catcher, and he's always run behind a good run blocking offensive line. And then he went and got himself hurt the year he was supposed to break out. Pro Football Focus, Spot Track doesn't have a money market value on him, but Pro Football Focus guesstimated that he would sign a 1 year, $2 million deal. Somewhere to have to prove himself. That's a bargain, I think, for Marlon Mack, who's got the speed, the home run speed. But the issue with Marlon Mack, doesn't really catch the ball well out of the backfield, doesn't give you much versatility other than just being a pure running back, which is essentially what Zach Moss and Devin Singletary do, but they give you a little bit more versatility out of that backfield. So Marlon Mack is something to consider. Obviously, we've mentioned Tevin Coleman, Jerick McKinnon, Matt Breida. If they're good enough for Kyle Shanahan, they're good enough for me. And TJ Yeldon's out there too.
Damn it, Randy. I wasn't pounding the table for Le'Veon. I know he's trolling me, but it's okay.
Josh Richardson said, let's draft Najee Harris. He's Derrick Henry, but faster. But talk to Josh about what your philosophy is going into this year's offseason. Because I like your philosophy. I'm getting behind your philosophy right now, I think.
My philosophy is this. Use free agency to find where you can inefficiencies, or maybe like a hit or two here on skill position players, like a Curtis Samuel, right? That type of guy, and rebuild the trenches. My focus this offseason is on the trenches. And if you come to a spot where you can take a shot on a playmaker here or there, then do it, right? If you're going into free agency and you're like, we're going to make sure we take care of the offensive line, maybe we're going to sign someone on the defensive line. We get to the draft. The first pick comes around and we go for Wyatt Davis. Fine. And then the second pick comes around and a guy like Brevin Jordan is sitting there in the second round. Then maybe you do strike at that point for a playmaker. Okay. Mm-hmm. But I'm not of the philosophy to go out and pay a Hunter Henry $10 million a year. That's not my philosophy. My philosophy is to spend the money on the trenches and address it where you can. See what you can do in free agency. If you can't address the trenches in free agency, I prefer for you to go after guys like Curtis Samuel, playmakers like that, and then address the trenches through the draft. So my philosophy is pretty simple. It's trenches are priority number one. And if you can find a playmaker here or there, then whether that's like a receiver or a safety linebacker hybrid combo in the draft, then take your spots and pick your spots to do it.
Yeah. I mean,
it's pretty straightforward.
I just pulled up, the Draft Network here to reference, but when you talk about rebuilding the trenches, we have 3 picks. We have 1 pick at 30. And then we have a second round pick and a third round pick. Here are the offensive tackles who are going to be available in that range: Jalen Mayfield, Dylan Radunes, Jackson Carman, Liam Eichenberg, Tevin Jenkins, Samuel Cosme, Alex Leatherwood, Walker Little, Spencer Brown. That's 9 guys that I just mentioned. 9 guys at offensive tackle. Then you go into interior offensive line. I really doubt Vera Tucker drops, but Wyatt Davis, Creed Humphrey, Josh Myers, Landon Dickerson, Trey Smith, Aaron Banks. Those are guys. You could even throw Deontay Brown in there, Ben Cleveland in there. There's a lot of talent on the interior in the late first, second, and third round range. You go and you look at edge rusher. It's you could have Ojulari there, Joseph Osai there, Jalen Phillips, Gregory Rousseau, Owe from Penn State, Patrick Jones, Carlos.
I'm coming around on Patrick Jones. I'm starting to like him.
Carlos Basham, like all of Ronnie Perkins, all of these guys in the second to third round range at edge rusher. And then you go to interior defensive line: Christian Barrymore, Tommy Togi, Levi from Washington, Jay Tuafili from USC, Nixon from Iowa, who I'm starting to really fall in love with, Tyler Shelvin, the names: Darius Stills, Marvin Williams, Jalen Twyland, Ali McNeil. The list goes on and on.
And think about this. The Bills went out and basically did that philosophy last year when they traded for Stephon Diggs, and it worked out wonderfully for them. Yeah. They knew there were talented wide receivers in the draft, but they went out and got the veteran playmaker. They got the guy who's proven at the skill position, which is what I want them to do. Go out and get a Curtis Samuel. And now look, if they draft a Tony at 30, like, is it going to be the end of the world if they don't go out and sign up like a Curtis Samuel in free agency? No. But then that means you better have done something about the trenches in free agency if you go out and draft
I don't feel
Tony at 30.
And that's what I'm getting at. Like, we just went through the list of free agent offensive tackles. We just went through the list of free agent guards, and the look on both of our faces was like,
yeah,
like,
exactly.
It was like, so you look at the depth of guard, tackle, interior defensive line, edge in the first 3 rounds of this draft. It's freaking insane how many names that I would look at and feel comfortable plugging and playing day one. So many. So for the Buffalo Bills, 1, 2, 3. Line. Like, that's all I want with my first 3 picks. Obviously, there are some exceptions you can make. If a player
Brevin Jordan, something like that.
If Brevin Jordan is sitting there in the second round and he's the highest on your board, or he's sitting there in the third round, which I doubt he will, there are exceptions you can make. But my goodness, go out and get yourself a playmaking difference maker in Curtis Samuel, and then just draft yourself a bunch of big fat dudes to go plug and play on those lines. Like, to me, that just seems like the most efficient use of your resources. Andrew Miller brings up Leonard Fournette, playoff Lenny, with the super chat. Thank you, Andrew. Always appreciate it. I don't hate playoff Lenny. So here's the thing, though. I've seen some all 22 of Leonard Fournette, and he'll just barrel himself into an offensive line when there's a giant hole in which you could have run through. So Leonard Fournette is a great athlete, but he's not the purest running back in the world. He shows up in the playoffs, but not so much the regular season. For the money you have to pay him, I think Zach Moss can probably do exactly what playoff Lenny gives you. Thomas Burke comes in and says, "Hey, Judge,
trade down." Playoff Lenny probably just earned himself a few extra bucks as well.
Yeah. Thomas Burke says trade down and pick up 2 offensive linemen and 2 defensive linemen in rounds 2 and 3. I don't disagree, Thomas. I don't disagree. Or you could have 3 guys and then draft a skill position guy. I don't disagree with you. But if you're trading back from 30, first of all, you need a team that wants to trade back with you. You're in a good spot. A team in the upper half of the second round might want to trade up to get to 30 so they can lock in a guy to a 5th-year option. Because that's the whole point of drafting a guy in the first round. You get 5 years. You get them cost controlled for 5 years. But at the end of the day, if Trey Lance and Mac Jones are gone, quarterback is usually the position players teams trade up for. Is anyone trading up for Kyle Trask or Jamie Newman? I don't know. So it looks great on paper. And you can do that all the time you want in all these different mock draft machines. But that doesn't mean in reality that Brandon Beane's phone is going to be rolling off the hook when pick number 30 comes up for a trade. And even if they did, I don't think any team is going to give up a second and a third for pick 30. It'll probably, in more likelihood, be a second and a fourth.
Unless they're way down in the second round, right? Unless it's a playoff team that's like down there in the late second and they want to come all the way up.
That would be the one exception. If it was a team that was around us, someone just said, why not? He's a good running back. He ain't great. Leonard Fournette ain't great. Leonard Fournette ain't special. He's a good athlete who makes some wild plays, but all around, he ain't going to be worth the money you're going to have to pay him. I think the love for Leonard Fournette is a little too high in here, and I think the appreciation for Zach Moss is a little too low.
Lenny Lover.
Duke Williams for a 3rd round pick, maybe. I think I mentioned this earlier, and I think I'm gonna upset some people.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna upset some people with this comment, but I think Harrison Phillips and Levi Wallace could be trade chips to help you move up in the draft, to help you pick up a middle round pick. I think both Harrison Phillips, because I mentioned you have Ed Oliver, you have Starlota Layla, you have Justin Zimmer, and then you have Harrison Phillips sitting there. And if we go and draft a defensive tackle or sign a defensive tackle, could Harrison Phillips net you a 4th or a 5th round pick? If we go out and sign a Xavier Rhodes in free agency or draft a cornerback early, and we're also sitting on Dane Jackson, could Levi Wallace net you a 4th or a 5th rounder? So to me, I think Harrison Phillips and Levi Wallace could be trade trips. Do you think I'm crazy in thinking that? I think we might have lost Dave's feed here.
I don't think you're crazy. Good. I don't know that you're going to get a 4th rounder for Levi Wallace.
Yeah.
Let me come back in.
All right. Yeah, I'm not saying like a 4th or a 5th. Like Levi Wallace will probably net you a 5th or a 6th round pick. Harry Phillips, same thing. Probably a 5th or a 6th round pick, or they could just be used in a trade chip. Like you're trying to move up in the draft. So you're offering your 4th round pick and Levi Wallace for a 3rd round pick or something of that nature. So it's just something that can be considered, and we're hopefully getting Dave back into our stream here. It was so lonely without you, Dave.
I heard you talking about Levi Wallace netting a 4th rounder, and my ears perked up and my internet blew out. So.
I was saying more. I'm saying more in terms of like you're the Buffalo Bills and you have 2 5th round picks, right? And you want to get into the 4th round. Levi Wallace in a 5th round pick for a 4th rounder, something like that. You can use them as a tip to move up in the draft.
Yeah, that's doable.
And again, that's only if obviously you find a suitable replacement. Because I honestly, we've had this conversation. I'd be completely comfortable with Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson at CB2 this year because I'm more worried about revamping that defensive line. Exactly. Yeah. All right, we got 2 position groups left. We'll speed through them real quick. Tight end. I think we both have the same high profile, big money tight end, and that is Jonu Smith. Do you agree that's our big money guy?
That's the big money guy. I mean, if you want to go all out, go for Hunter Henry, but it seems like Jonu Smith would probably be a better fit. You know, I would imagine that Jonu Smith probably be a little cheaper than Hunter Henry, but it seems like a lot of people like Jonu Smith for this team. So he would be the big money guy. And honestly, I don't think he's going to get that much more money than Gerald Everett, who's a guy we like too. So, I mean, if you're talking about Gerald Everett at $6-7 million a year, Jonu Smith at 8-9, it is tempting to go for a guy like Jonu Smith.
Yeah, I think when all is said and done, Jonu's going to net somewhere between 8 and 10. And I think Gerald will get you somewhere between 5 and maybe 7. I don't know if Gerald will get up into the $8 million range, but those are the two guys that I have my money, like that I have the biggest interest in. And, cover one was really breaking down Dawson Knox's game the last couple of weeks. And they talk about how Dawson Knox is used as a guy they dumped the ball off to. He was using the short field, catch the ball and get your yak. It wasn't often, and oftentimes it was by design. It wasn't often that Dawson Knox went down the football field, went vertical. So if Dawson Knox is your move tight end, you're looking for that more linear straight line type of dude, right? So Gerald Everett seems like a perfect match. Jonu Smith is another hybrid. So you're putting two hybrids together. Now, don't get me wrong. Jonu Smith is actually a very good blocker. Despite the fact that he's more of a Dawson Knox hybrid type, really good blocker. So is Dawson Knox. So those are two guys who are very similar, who can both get your yak plays, and Jonu Smith can go down the field as well. So, but Gerald Everett just makes so much sense to me. I'm not saying they're the same caliber player, but Brian Daboll came from New England. If Dawson Knox is your move tight end, if he's your Aaron Hernandez, you're looking for your Gronk to go with your Aaron Hernandez. So Gerald Everett, you could see in the trade market Zach Ertz or Kyle Rudolph. I think those are the type of tight ends that you could see the Buffalo Bills pursue. Now Ertz and Rudolph are going to cost you draft capital, and depending on whether they want to restructure or not, are going to cost you a pretty penny as well.
I'm not interested in Rudolph personally. I think I don't know how much he's got left. I mean, I'd much rather go take a shot at trading for Ertz than I would Rudolph. I know Rudolph probably will cost you way less, but I don't know. I'm not on the Kyle Rudolph train. I'm more on, like, if you're going to give money, go for like a middle tier guy like an Everett, and that frees you up a little bit in the draft. If a guy like Brevin Jordan, let's say, doesn't make it to you in the second or third round, and someone picks him, you don't feel as bad as missing out on a guy like that if you've already got Gerald Everett in the house. So plus then it allows you to kind of, like you said, focus on the lines with those picks. So I'm kind of like, I'm not in on necessarily Jonu Smith, but I'm definitely in on Gerald Everett.
And it's crazy too. Randy says Rudolph doesn't seem interested in taking a pay cut. Yeah, he wants out of Minnesota, mostly because he doesn't feel like he's being utilized correctly there. He wants more targets. I don't even know how many targets would be able to go around in Buffalo for the weapons we have.
Right.
Thomas Berg says Everett replaces Lee Smith. He's definitely better than Lee Smith. So
he's catch the ball too.
He's going to give you an ability to catch the ball as well. Gerald Everett, I think, is my number one want at the tight end position, just because I think he can play in line. The thing you're looking for is the Buffalo Bills have to address tight end. Like, you look at this roster, it is Dawson Knox, it is Nate Becker, it is Reggie Gilliam, and it is Tommy Sweeney. And one of the ways in which the Buffalo Bills can fix the run game, and you saw it in the Super Bowl when we played against when the Kansas City Chiefs played against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Kansas City had no answer for 12 personnel. 2 tight ends run the football. And it's not exactly like you can't pass out of those situations either, especially if you have 2 quality tight ends like a Gerald Everett and a Dawson Knox, or a Jonu Smith and a Dawson Knox, or a Brevin Jordan and a Dawson Knox, or a Pat Freiermuth and a Dawson Knox. If you have 2 tight ends, you can throw out of those situations too. The Buffalo Bills, I think one of the easiest ways to be able to fix their pass or their running game this year is to probably be able to put themselves in more positions where they can run 2 tight end sets. In order to run 2 tight end sets and be effective with it, you need more than Lee Smith or Reggie Gilliam or Tommy Sweeney. You need a tight end with a pulse next to Dawson Knox. And you also take a lot of pressure off of Dawson Knox, making him your TE2. So whether it's the second round of the draft, a Brevin Jordan or a Pat Freiermuth, whether it's spending big money on a Jonu Smith or a Gerald Everett, I'm not much interested in the bottom of the barrel tight ends that this free agent class has to offer. Demetrius Harris, Eric Tomlinson, Virgil Green, or even a middle round draft pick. I'm not interested. I need this is one of the positions where I need somebody bona fide. Like, I need someone who has potential there. Randy says, what about moving Duke Williams to tight end? Okay, but I don't picture Duke Williams playing 12 personnel. We need that inline tight end, in my opinion, a guy who can run that 12 personnel. Cameron Brate could be available. Tampa Bay is pretty high up against the cap. OJ Howard could be available. I need a name there.
A couple people mentioned OJ Howard.
Yeah, whether it's Pat or it's Brevin, or whether it is a name. I need something there. I have no problem with Tommy Sweeney being TE3 next year if he can get himself healthy.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. TE3 for Sweeney.
But he's not
Get
TE2.
Knox. Right, I agree. And I think Knox isn't TE1 right now.
Yeah.
He's TE2. So I'm with you on that.
So
I would
knows
love to
Randy
get
was
Gerald
joking.
Everett. Hey, sign Gerald Everett, and then maybe you still draft a Brevin Jordan, right? I mean, I don't know, right? You might still do that. Less likely, but
Jacob Strands says Hunter Long is good. I don't disagree that Hunter Long isn't good, but do you see Hunter Long coming in day one being tight end one and taking the pressure off of Dawson Knox and being able to go get on the field constantly and give the Buffalo Bills the ability to play 12 personnel? I just don't see it. As the only two rookie tight ends I see being capable of doing that are Freiermuth and Brevin Jordan. I could be wrong. Maybe Hunter Long is the steal of the draft. And it doesn't mean I dislike Hunter Long as a prospect. He would just be a guy I'd feel more comfortable bringing in as a TE3 and letting him develop.
Yes.
More so than wanting him to be an impact rookie. I am Tommy Rhodes says, you think you would want another rookie tight end? Honestly, I don't think so. But the way the Buffalo Bills talked about tight end, they got to find one somehow. So if all the free agents say no, they might have to draft one. It should get really interesting what the Bills decide to do at tight end. All right. Last position. And then we are done for this afternoon session of the Air Raid Hour. Cornerback. Do we each have the same big name corner?
Probably.
Who's your big name corner?
I'm assuming you have Richard Sherman, but
I don't.
I could be wrong.
I don't.
But I actually had a top of the line. Well, Rashad Breeland is a guy that gets mentioned every single year. I don't know how much he's going to get paid, but I mean, you already mentioned Xavier
is Levi Wallace. Like
the guy I put on my list was Shaquille Griffin. Honestly, he would probably cost you $10 million a year. But I think coming from that Seattle defense, I know they play a lot of cover 3, cover 1, but from a zone standpoint, I think he would be a good fit. 3 interceptions in 2020, only age 26. I think he could bring that attitude to the other side, but I don't think he's realistic. In my notes up here, I put there isn't really a top end CB that I would pay in free agency. That's what I put in my notes. I would rather spend like the 6 to 8 million again on a 1-year deal with Richard Sherman would be my William Jackson is the only guy I would say.
And he's 29. He's not exactly a young guy either.
Yeah.
Richard Sherman. But here's the thing. Richard Sherman on like a 1-year deal for like 7-8 million. That sounds enticing, right? For a guy who did not play a lot in 2020. However, I'm seeing the estimates I'm seeing for Richard Sherman are $12 to $14 million a year.
There's no way. There's no way.
Oh no.
There's no way. He's not getting
no way. Anything remotely close to double digits for Richard Sherman, I'm not comfortable with. And I think just from the standpoint of roster building, I don't know how comfortable I am paying another cornerback double digits, especially with the 2 safeties. I'd rather draft a guy, or I'd rather look for a mercenary, a guy like Xavier Rhodes, who was my guy. 2 years, 2 years, 14 million, 2 years, 12 million, a guy who could play a little bit of zone, a little bit of man, give you a little bit more versatility. And he gives you two years to develop Dane Jackson or find another guy in the draft. So, Xavier Rhodes is number 1 on my list for corners.
I think I'd rather have Xavier for 2 years than Richard Sherman for 1.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that.
And depending on how much money he wants, I mean, Patrick Peterson has, enters the chat here as another guy who, if he's willing to accept like a 1-year, $8 million deal, and, for whatever reason, the Buffalo Bills couldn't address some other positions and they have that $8 million available, I'm more than willing to give Patrick Peterson a 1-year deal.
Yeah. 1 year.
Is he still as good as he used to be? No, but he's still not going to embarrass himself over there either. But just look at Tampa Bay. I mean, look at that secondary. It was all 2nd, 3rd round draft picks. There wasn't any name recognition in that. Antoine Winfield Jr. was the biggest name. Jordan Whitehead, like Murphy Bunting. These guys are all 2nd, 3rd round draft picks. And Tampa Bay said, we're not going to spend any money in our secondary. We're just going to invest draft capital, and we're going to spend all our money up front and we're going to make the quarterback's life a living hell. So it really doesn't matter who's in our secondary. Whereas other teams like New England and Miami are all about paying their DBs and locking you down, but they play man-to-man defense. They don't play zone defense. So if I'm the Buffalo Bills, I'm not looking to invest too much money. The only other name that I really saw that really was of interest to me was Michael Davis from Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, you mentioned him last time too. Yep.
I've been a big fan of Michael Davis. He's a guy who can play press man and play zone. He's got size. He's got strength. He's someone I can see Sean McDermott, getting in here in the $4 to $5 million range, maybe $3 to $5 million range, depending on what his market is, and locking him up for 3 or 4 years. And Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier coaching him up to be better than he is. And he adds more versatility to your defense because you ain't going to see Levi Wallace playing press man. So a guy like Michael Davis can give you a little bit more physicality, can give you a little bit more versatility than a Levi Wallace. That's the only issue with Levi Wallace. As a zone corner, he's all right. Like, he's not going to embarrass himself, but you lose your versatility to play any type of man-to-man defense. Anytime. Like we saw the Tennessee game when Trey White was out and Josh Norman was just getting smoked by Corey Davis and AJ Brown. So the Buffalo Bills, I think, need to do something to give themselves a little bit more versatility and to run some other stuff in that secondary, but should be interesting. If not, if we don't go for any names, I'd still like to see them bring in another veteran, an EJ Gaines type, just to sort of make me feel better than just being just Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace, even if it's just like a TJ Carey or a Daryl Worley, just another veteran, just to sort of put me at ease if we don't, go for something bigger or better, like an early round draft pick or a mid-tier free agent.
You're saying no to bringing back Josh Norman on a much cheaper deal?
No. I want a guy who brings more versatility.
That ship has sailed.
I
agree. I agree.
He can run for mayor of Buffalo if he wants, but he I don't want him on my football team next year. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that should just about do it for this session of the Air Raid Hour, unless we have any closing questions here in the final minute or two. Thank you for joining us early. I'll make sure to cut a promo and to advertise so we can, people who missed it can catch us at our usual time of 8 p.m. Eastern time on repeat. So until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.